welcome to this video, and I'm going to tell you the truth, or at least I'm going to talk to you about the truth about the name Taíno, which is a demonym. It's a name to refer to an ethnicity. So therefore, this is a supposed name for an ethnicity. It was supposedly an error on the Spanish side, and what was happening was, and this is what people say, so this word means the good ones, right? So people were saying that when the Spanish came to the island of Puerto Rico, that these Taíno, or these, what people call Indians, which are the Native American and Native Caribbeans of the island of Puerto Rico, so in turn, the real name is Boricua because their island is called Boriquén. So the story goes that these Taíno Indians told the Spanish upon contact. These Arahuacos told the Spanish a few times, Taíno, 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 and that they kept repeating the word Taíno. So therefore, it was understood that the Spanish actually understood from this that the indigenous people of the island of Puerto Rico were calling themselves Taíno. So there is sides to this debate, and I'm not gonna try to debate, but I'm just gonna bring forth information. So for this video, I would much rather that you would think of me more as a messenger of a scientist that has done his research, and I have a little bit more information than meets the eye. So what type of disciplines do I have to mix so I can reach such a conclusion, right? So along this video, we will find out some of the factors that actually makes this demonym, this ethnic demonym, to refer to the indigenous people of the island of Puerto Rico. So how and why and what's the truth? Is this the actual name that the Taíno knew themselves by? So, like I said, there was two parts of this debate, and I'm not gonna be, I'm not gonna debate or anything, but I'm just gonna bring forth some of my information so you can see that when you mix together the historical with the archaeological and the genetics, who will then debate such information when you have such data in your hands on the table? So therefore, who has the ability to debate such claims from information that I'm just going to bring forward, right? So how can we unveil the actual truth of the matter of what's happening? Because one people say, like I was saying, that the word Taíno is in error. And the other side says that they were actually naming themselves the Taíno as an ethnic term. So, like I had stated of previously, what people believe this to be is that it was an error. So there may be a lot of information online, and on the social medias you may attain such information where people may explain with some educated points and connections, and these are people that have done their research, and I will not take away from what they say. But then there's the other side that suggests that what was happening was that they were actually telling the Spaniards that they were called the Taíno. So, like we mentioned previously, the word Taíno means the good ones. Because the word Tai or Tai itself means good. And then the word no is the suffix for plural. So therefore, the Taíno were supposedly from this side of the table telling the Spanish that they were the good ones. So whatever they were trying to convey, whatever type of information that the indigenous people of the island of Puerto Rico were trying to convey to the Spanish of Puerto Rico, for whatever reason. It could be war reasons, it could be because they were probably being raided, which is in history. But for whatever reason, supposedly they were saying that they were the good ones. So okay, that's one side. But what if I tell you, viewer, that you're watching, whether you're wherever you are, or whether you are from the Caribbean, or whether you have ancestry of the indigenous people of Puerto Rico and all of that, or whether you are Puerto Rican, or whether you are Boricua, or if you just love the indigenous people of whatever nation, then lend me your ear for a few minutes so I can explain to you why is this information actually more fuzzy than it seems. So, in the beginning of my research and my investigation, I had a whole bunch of notions of a whole bunch of people that were telling me that the word Taíno had most likely some sort of a prehistorical type of origin. Some type of a prehistorical but yet historical and known type of origin. So then what's happening here? And how can I explain to you? Okay, so in order for you to understand this video and what am I pertaining to, so in order for you to understand that, you have to go to the original explanation of who are the A and E of the Americas. Let's go to the basics. Who are the A and E? And let's explore their genetics. If you explore their genetics, you will reach a factual conclusion, and you will have something that is already written as a fact in historical books or in any genealogist or geneticist or genetics papers or any sort of information pertaining the claim. So, like I said, it's not a claim. Like we were saying previously, this is information. For instance, the genetics of the Ane, the ancient native. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the ANA. I'm sorry, it's the ANA. So who are the ANA of ancient Americas? They are the ancient Native Americans. So what does that mean? These are the ancient Native Americans of the Americas who arrived Americas, who conquered all of Native America. They spread all over, and however, they didn't experience the future immigrations that were coming from Southeast Asia, for instance, Oceania and Polynesia, and other immigrations in waves that were coming from Siberia. So these first ones that arrived were categorized as Paleo-Siberian. But then, after many centuries kept passing by, groups and waves of these Neo-Siberians were then arriving into the Americas. So the ANA, the ancient Native Americans, have a genetic background, and we know which is their genotype. So which is their genotype, right? Their genotype is made up, which they are the ancient Native Americans, right? Before all the mixing happened. All the ancient Native Americans, whom are the first ones who arrived into the Americas, were exactly 40% ancient North Eurasian. Were 40% ancient North Eurasian, which on this side is referring to the Y chromosome, which is meaning the father line or the father side of the nuclear DNA, which this 40% is full ancient North Eurasian from the father line. So that means that the male lineage of the ancient Native Americans, the male lineage was composed mainly of what? Of these ancient North Eurasian men, whom were what? Pastoralists, warriors. They were taller. They were Paleo-Siberian. They were from Afontovagora. And these places are also apparently and eventually overlapping with the complexes of the BMAC cultures, Afontovagora, and people mix the historical and they want to bring a whole bunch of scriptural things, and they want to say those scriptural things, but then they don't know how to explain them. So now let's explain what is that 60% side. So the 60% side of the ancient Native Americans, the ANA, was composed of these women that were most likely from haplogroup. I forgot in this part, but if it's not A, then it's most likely B. So then it should be most likely be of these Paleo-Siberian women that come from North Asia. That means that they are most likely most similar to ancient Japanese, Koreans, and those Koryaks, and those Kets from Northern Asia, Northeast Asia, and parts of North Siberia, and Kamchatka, and then the Ryukyuan Islands, all the way to Japan, and well, all of those type of women is that type of woman that came in with these East Asiatic type of women that composes 60% of the genetics of the ancient Native Americans. 60%, because this would maybe allude onto the strength and the power of the genetics of the female side, because because in this situation is at a rate of 60%. But in reality, this would be totally explained by the frequency of women. So this would mean that these men had way more women, at least 10%, if we were to look at the genetics, at least 10% or 10 to 20% more women than the average ancient North Eurasian. So what's happening here? So basically, these ancient North Eurasians, you know who they were? So there were 3 complexes, but if you want to understand it further, they were mixed with many ethnicities. For instance, if I would explain the Paleo-Siberian men, whom are the ancient North Eurasians, well, these are the ancient North Eurasian men that at one point were Kurgan or Kurgans, and then they ended up in the, well, before I tell you that, well, they were Paleo-Siberian. They were considered Paleo-Siberian because they were partial children of the Paleo-Siberian women. But from the other side, they had a Western Eurasian or West Asian lineage, which means that this was people that originated near Africa or in the Levant, and they migrated into the regions near to the Pontic-Caspian steppe, and they became a new ethnicity, mixing with other people in those regions that were Northern European or Western hunter-gatherers. So the ones from the Levant moved upward because they were thrown out by these people that were called the Neo-Assyrians. And these people that were thrown out were also pastoralists. They were also warlike. They were also Paleo-Siberian-like, but they stem from that Near East region or near Africa, that Afro-Asiatic, and that's why they call it Afro-Asiatic, because of this source. So this connects and overlaps totally with the information that we are providing previously. How these people were kicked out and they were not peaceful. These were warlike. They survived. They entered parts of Scythia, and I will tell you how can we identify these people through some names, and we are going to identify them as we walk through the historical part and the genetical part. Remember that we are not going away from any direction, which is the direction that we are looking for, which is that the genetics match the historical, and whatever they said and whatever claim they spoke about the ancient North Eurasians, we can also find them in these complexes. Because like I said previously, they had traveled to Scythia and to parts of Central Asia, which were the same, these people that were not peaceful, that were from the Levant, and that they later became Paleo-Siberian. How? Because these are the ancient North Eurasians. They were not Western hunter-gatherers or Eastern hunter-gatherers. For the Western hunter-gatherers and the Eastern hunter-gatherers were the original Northern Europeans. So these people enter Scythia and they spread down. As I said, they go to parts of the Hindu Kush. They go to parts of the Hindu Kush mountains, and they spread on into their civilizations and in these societies and these clans that move abroad from the Pontic-Caspian steppe in that part of Central Asia, and they even reached parts of Siberia. So, first of all, these people influenced from the places where they mixed and the difference that they had in their cultures, that more to the Hindu Kush mountains, they mixed with Elamites, that became Persia, and then it became Parthia. And then next to that, we had the Bactria, Margiana complex, and we also had the Aryans. So what is happening here, and how can we correlate this with the historical? So, and with the genetics. Now we know that these are the ancient North Eurasians, right? And we can match them by their archaeological sites all the way to their genetics and to the historical. So like I said, Parthia, Bactria, and Aryan land. So what's happening here? The Aryans, Iran. So the most important thing that we should remember is that if we talk about one ethnicity, they weren't one ethnicity at that time. They used to control how clans used to intermingle with others. And one proof of how, for instance, an Israelite or something like that would survive is because they weren't these peaceful people. So history will paint you one thing, but the truth is that they had different customs and they were more warlike than most of the people would think. So let's trace them through Scythia. So we're gonna say that this is started as haplogroup P, most likely stemming from the Levant. So haplogroup P breaks into R and then R1, and then it breaks and it subclades into R1AQ, and then much later in the near the Bohemian region it became R1B, which is considered or associated with West Eurasia. So therefore, let's trace these ancient North Eurasians as they settle near the Pontic-Caspian steppe. So for instance, these people had a king named Arxas. These people had names like the Sakas, which derive from the same names as Arxas, as Sakas, which comes from Isaac, and Asak. So these people didn't know themselves as most likely Israel or something like that, because like I'm saying, there was a clan of ancient North Eurasians, and they stem most likely and partially from northern tribes of Israel who were kicked to Central Asia. But they were not named Israelites at this time. They knew themselves as the Isaacs. So one of these clans was Ephraim and Manasseh. And their children, some of these ancient North Eurasian pastoralists, had clans, and they had clans parting from the children that the patriarchs used to have, and these children would become leaders of their own clans, and they would spread just as history says how ancient North Eurasians have a culture of spreading, where they have a clan and then they have to expand their clan, and they move from clan to clan, and they have this type of warrior nomadic lifestyle. So one of the children was Aaron or Ehron. Ehron is the same thing as saying Aryan, because they were ancient North Eurasians. Everybody knows that these people are the same. The Aryans were ancient North Eurasians that developed and were developing, and that they were beginning to become the creators of lighter skin. The Aryans from Ehron, Bactriana from his brother, who was Bahran. They were all warriors from clans, and they had a clan and a kingdom that ruled over these people that they conquered. And their older brother was the leader and the king of Parthia, which had one of those kings named Arxas. And then his name is Tahan. So that's why they say all of this, and they claim all these things that you have heard online, and why they say that it wasn't an demonic error, that they were actually designating themselves as the Tahanites, as we would say in today's language, but for them they were trying to say Taíno. Oh, we are from the Taíno line, because the Taíno line is the ancient North Eurasian lineage that later became the ancient Native Americans that came into the Americas. But they never mixed with all their brother tribes. They went to the island, went to this place, went to that place, and they knew they were the Tahanites. So his name was Tahan. So that's why that's one of the reasons they say that he was, or that the Taíno were Taíno, because they were Taíno from Tahan. People were trying to tell me this like a long time ago, maybe like 3 years ago, maybe, and I also have seen this throughout my life. But for sure, I confirm to you that this historical claim also connects with the genetics. If you want to connect it, it's easy. Just look where Bactriana and the Parthia and the ancient North Eurasians were, and where they go. Where were the places that they go, and where did they spread to? So does that mean that the lineage of Taínos is actually a lineage of an ancient clan of rulers that used to rule over Parthia, Bactria, and even Iran, as in the Aryans in the Hindu Kush Mountains? Did the Taíno in the prehistorical were actually a lineage of kings and rulers of Central Asia back in the day? Write your thoughts down in the comments. And remember, I'm not giving you a claim. I am presenting the proof or the evidence of the matter, or however you want to call it. But if it's there, then the word Taíno to this day is truly not yet resolved. Thank you.